A short moment later, the large ship that was gliding along the embroidered flower river shuddered ever so slightly. If Chen Pingyan and the others hadn't been notified beforehand, they most likely wouldn't have noticed anything out of the ordinary. Even though they couldn't see the Een god with their naked eyes, they could clearly sense that this section of the ship had indeed become colder and more eerie than before. Immediately afterward, Chen Pingyan noticed a young swordsman sitting cross-legged not far away from them. A sword hung sideways behind his waist, and he was also carrying a long item wrapped in cotton in his arms. It looked like a saber or a sword. He stood up and walked over to Chen Pingyan. After taking a few steps, he smiled faintly at the hidden Een god and didn't advance any further. He cut straight to the chase and said, "I've brought passports for the 4 of you. They've been stamped with the red seal of the Dragon Spring County's government office, and they also include the permission letter pertaining to your long journey to another nation. With regards to who I am, that isn't important. You simply need to know that I'm acquainted with Alyang. In other words, I'm definitely not your enemy. In terms of the minor conflict that took place on the ship just then, you children don't need to worry about that either. The county magistrate of Wanping County won't delay your journey to seek knowledge." In the end, the young swordsman offered the long item wrapped in cotton with both hands. He looked at the little girl wearing the bright red jacket and carrying a bookcase and said with a smile, "You're Miss Baoping, right? Alyang told the Great Li Empire to make sure to safely return this saber to you." Even though Li Baoping was excited, she still remained put. Chen Pingyan walked forward by himself and accepted auspicious talisman from the swordsman's hands. "Thank you, senior." The young swordsman laughed heartily and replied, "You're all Alyang's friends, so I don't dare to regard myself as your senior." "Is Alyang doing well?" Chen Pingyan asked. The swordsman's expression remained unchanging, and he replied with a nod, "Don't worry, he's doing very well." Song Chongjing had personally ordered a trusted subordinate to bring the saber out of the capital and hand it over to him. After returning it, the young swordsman felt like a huge weight had finally been lifted off his shoulders. "I'll head over to the 2nd level to notify them now," he said. "The 4 of you can relax and continue on your journey. From this point onward, as long as it pertains to the imperial court or local governments, your journey will be smooth all the way until Yefu Pass. Apart from this, however, the Great Li Empire won't interfere with anything else. Of course, if you come across any troubles or mishaps, the imperial court will be willing to do everything in its ability to help if you notify the border army or local government." Chen Pingyan looked the young swordsman in the eye and replied with a nod, "We understand." The young swordsman retrieved 4 passports from his sleeve and handed them to Chen Pingyan. In the end, he swallowed the words that had already reached the tip of his tongue and chose to say something more polite instead. He cupped his fists and said, "Then farewell. I'll take my leave after notifying the people on the 2nd level." Chen Pingyan awkwardly cupped his fists to return the gesture. In a top-notch private room on the 2nd level that was decorated with exquisite porcelain wares, there was an old man and a swordsman in white, both wearing solemn expressions. Next to them, the incoming county magistrate and his wife and son were all trembling in apprehension, not daring to breathe too loudly. All of them were standing. Only a single unwelcome guest was sitting there and enjoying wine on his own. He was strongly built, and there was the pattern of an azure snake running across his sleeves. As he inhaled and exhaled, white mist wreathed around his body. Judging from his appearance, this man was definitely no ordinary person. However, the man immediately stood up and bowed with cupped fists when he saw the young swordsman enter. He didn't say anything, yet his demeanor was filled with respect. The young swordsman waved his hand in acknowledgement and didn't spare so much as a single glance for the old man and the swordsman who was renowned in the southern regions of the Great Li Empire. Instead, he looked at the county magistrate of Wanping County and said, "When you arrive in Wanping County, remember to abide by the rules and diligently perform your role as their parent official. Don't yabber about what happened today, and treat this matter as case closed. The imperial court can pretend that nothing ever happened. If news of this leaks, however, perhaps I won't personally travel over to look for you. However, the great river god of the embroidered flower river can easily twist your head off your body." The young swordsman didn't want to say anything else, and he simply turned to the great river god of the embroidered flower river, who didn't dare to sit in his presence. "Help me keep an eye on things. I'm going to return now. Then I'll see you off here," the great river god said in a solemn voice. The young swordsman exited the elegant private room and arrived in the corridor outside. As he gazed at the river and recalled the words of the young boy in straw sandals, he couldn't help but feel strong emotions. In the end, his body vanished in a flash. Enfield introduces a bold new face to the front line. Dynasty cast moments fans still talk about today. The tallest women on Earth. Number 4 is only a teenager. Why were martial artists always viewed as inferior to chi refiners? This was due to what the large majority of pure martial artists viewed as the foundation of their cultivation. Regardless of whether it was fist techniques, sword techniques, or techniques pertaining to the 18 weapons, all of them were commonly referred to as martial arts. However, in the eyes of chi refiners, these martial arts were completely unrelated to the concept of Dao. If martial arts didn't elevate to the level of martial Dao, then one could only remain bogged down in the mud forever. Perhaps even the young boy himself didn't understand just how profound his sincere realization pertaining to the fist technique was. These were questions that only grandmasters above the 6th tier of martial arts would ponder deeply and ask themselves. These were questions that they needed to answer themselves. After receiving a secret order from her superior, a woman with an unremarkable appearance started to climb Go Table Mountain with a beautiful young girl who had previously been a boat hostess. They trekked toward the north. This was the first time the young girl had traveled so far away from home. Thus, she continued to turn around and glance back with reluctance in her eyes. The woman didn't comment on this. This was human nature, so there was no need for her to criticize anything. In any case, her branch in the Palace of Eternal Spring was slightly strange, in the sense that they cultivated the mind but still valued relationships highly. Ordinary chi refiners viewed relationships as baggage that would drag them down, yet her branch viewed relationships as a means to attain Dao. Thus, it was actually a good thing that the young girl was feeling homesick. However, why was she traversing Go Table Mountain with the young girl on foot? Her superior hadn't explained this, and she hadn't been in the position to ask either. They climbed mountains and crossed rivers, and the scenery along the way was tranquil and pleasant. The young girl was innocent and naive, and even though she was slightly exhausted, she was still in extremely high spirits. As they walked, she picked a flower from the side of the path and lightly waved it around. She started to hum a tune from her hometown that had been passed down through the generations. The woman from the Palace of Eternal Spring frowned slightly, yet she still didn't say anything. In the distance, there was an extraordinarily handsome young man slowly walking forward like a spirit in the mountains. His gaze remained fixed on the young girl the entire time. The young girl's voice was ethereal and melodious, so even though the tune was a mournful one, it sounded unique and different when hummed by her. It was sad but not pained. The soft singing of the young man gently harmonized with the humming of the young girl. His melody was slightly different, more mellow and more sorrowful. The young girl was like a yellow warbler fluttering through the spring grass, while the young man was like an old crow standing alone in front of a grave. One was joyfully chirping, while one was quietly whimpering. In the end, the young girl suddenly looked up as she walked along the bluestone slabs of the post road that was built on the ridge of the mountain. She noticed a young man in white walking over from the distance, with his appearance as handsome as could be. The two of them crossed paths on the narrow post road. However, the young man had already lowered his head and fallen silent. He quietly brushed past her just like that. The young girl couldn't help but look back. She discovered that the young man was standing nearby, not walking but not turning around either. He stood with his back facing her. The young girl was slightly puzzled. She shook her head before turning around and continuing to walk forward. The remaining 100 or so kilometers of their journey on the embroidered flower river was peaceful and smooth sailing. When Chen Ping'an and the others disembarked, Li Huai and Lin Shui were already carrying brand new bookcases. Along with Li Baoping, they were now increasingly living up to their so-called journeys with books on their back. As a result, Chen Ping'an now looked like a young servant for children from large and powerful clans. If one didn't see with their own eyes, one would find it hard to imagine that the young boy was actually a practicing martial artist. Moreover, he was a martial artist who had resoundingly defeated the martial arts subordinate of a county magistrate of the Great Li Empire. In fact, the martial arts subordinate hadn't even been able to throw a single punch. When they disembarked the ship, this martial arts subordinate had been carried off on a stretcher. Before disembarking, Chen Ping'an had already studied a geomancy map of the area carefully. He didn't plan to travel through Wanping County town. Instead, they would take a detour around the town and continue south through a magnificent mountain range. This section of the journey would take them approximately half a month on foot. Chen Ping'an had asked around on the ship, and he had learned that there was a mountain path that they could follow. However, it would be far more difficult to traverse than the bluestone path that snaked through Go Table Mountain. Horse carriages wouldn't fit, and most people walked this path with donkeys or mules. If they didn't choose this mountain path, then they would have to pass through a county town. However, Lin Shui said that he was yet to comprehend the Yang talismans, so he would be unable to conceal the innate Yin energy of the Yin god. As such, the Yin god wouldn't be able to enter the county town. According to Aoyang, it was very likely that the city god pavilion, the Confucian temple, the martial sage temple, and the residence of the general would all naturally ostracize the Yin god. If a mighty figure was present in the county town, then it was also likely that they would face some complications. As they walked, they continued to ask the passers-by for directions. During these times, Chun Ping'an would also probe the villagers about whether there were any strange legends relating to these mountains. For example, whether there were mountain ghosts present. When the villagers saw that they were 4 young children, with all of them carrying bookcases, they treated them as young students from rich families who had run out to adventure. They smiled as they introduced the surrounding mountains and waters to Chun Ping'an and the others. They said that these places didn't even have names, so how could there possibly be ghosts or spirits? At the very least, they had never heard anything of the sort before. In the end, most of the villagers suggested that they visit the river god shrine by the embroidered flower river. They claimed that drawing fortune sticks and praying to the god there was very effective, and perhaps there was genuinely a mighty river god watching over them. The county magistrate would also lead a delegation of people to worship the river god each year. On this day, the deafening bangs of firecrackers would resonate throughout the sky, and the atmosphere in the area would be as lively as could be. The 4 children arrived before the mountain range at noon. Standing in front of the mountains, Li Huai bowed with cupped hands before vigorously bowing another 3 times. Looking up and seeing no movement from Chun Ping'an, he asked in puzzlement, "Chun Ping'an, didn't you bow before entering Go Table Mountain last time? You said you were paying respects to the mountain god. So why are you slacking off this time?" Chun Ping'an hesitated for a moment before eventually replying, "I frequently entered the mountains with Old Man Yang in the past, so I managed to pick up some skills in terms of observing the mountains and tasting clay. When he was in a good mood, he would talk to me about the forms and directions of the mountains. He said that there are many considerations when it comes to the location where a mountain god places their gold statue or whatnot. If we want to know whether there's a mountain god residing in a mountain, we can roughly determine this by carefully observing the mountain before we enter. Moreover, the locals all said that there's nothing strange about these mountains, so I can more or less confirm that this isn't the territory of a mountain god." Lin Shui suddenly recalled something, and he added, "The Yin god told me that each empire can only have a limited number of formal mountain gods and river gods. There can't be gods and deities everywhere. Otherwise, they'll run rampant and eventually cause catastrophe, bringing chaos and complexity to the fortune of a region. Moreover, the conflict between mountains and rivers is similar to how people fight over land and water sources. If there are too many gods, then things actually become detrimental for the empires. Thus, mountain gods won't appear in places that aren't explicitly recorded in the local county chronicles." Li Huai was slightly disappointed, and he sighed, and I still wanted to collect a few more painted puppets." As it turned out, the disaster turned into a fortune in Go Table Mountain that had resulted in Li Huai receiving a lively painted puppet had caused him to feel eager with anticipation. He was eager to receive a painted puppet for each mountain that he visited. If that were the case, then wouldn't his small bookcase be filled with puppets by the time he reached the academy in Great Sui Nation? Otherwise, if there were only a single puppet and a single book in his bamboo bookcase, things would seem a little too empty. "And you still had the gall to call Chun Ping'an miserly before?" Lin Shui chuckled in indignation. "I never said that. I simply said that Chun Ping'an is a virtuous person who makes his fortune in a proper way." Li Huai retorted with a guileless look. "How obsequious!" Lin Shui humphed coldly. Lin Hai was enraged, and he shouted, "If it wasn't for me begging and pleading, would you have been able to get a small bamboo bookcase? Lin Shui, have some conscience, will you?" "Shut up," Li Baoping snapped. Chun Ping'an would practice walking meditation whenever there was no one around. However, he didn't dare to make big movements because he was carrying a large basket on his back. As a result, he would slow down his pace whenever he could. Moreover, when teaching him the 18 stops in Pillow Relay Station, Aoyang had also told him that being slow was the essence of this technique. Now that he was stuck between the 6th stop and the 7th stop, not able to overcome this barrier no matter what, Chun Ping'an decided to practice the walking meditation of the mountain shaking fist technique first. After entering the mountains and walking for approximately 4 hours, Li Huai was already panting heavily. Li Baoping was also huffing and puffing. Chun Ping'an understood that this was the limit of their single breath. dancer. Since they were coincidentally passing by a creek, he decided to stop there for a rest. Lin Shuyi was calm and relaxed, and there were only a few beads of sweat on his forehead. This was as expected of someone who had set foot on the path of cultivation. It was just that he still couldn't compare to Chun Pingyan. After they all found a spot to sit down, Chun Pingyan retrieved Li Baoping's saber from his large basket. This was the slender saber that Aoyang had referred to as auspicious talisman. Even though he had called this a bottom-ranked saber, Chun Pingyan was no blind fool, and he was instead someone who was extremely familiar with kitchen knives and machetes. In fact, he had even borrowed Ning Yao's skirt dagger for a period of time. Thus, he knew that this saber was definitely very valuable. Whenever there was no one around, he would retrieve the small dragon slaying platform that had mysteriously appeared in his basket and use it to carefully sharpen the blade of the saber. After unsheathing the saber, Chun Pingyan first lightly dipped the shiny black dragon slaying platform in the creek. He then squatted down by the creek and started to slowly sharpen the saber. His actions were smooth and relaxed, and it was as if he were handling the most delicate and fragile tribute porcelain from his hometown. Chun Pingyan enjoyed focusing his mind on one thing. This was especially the case if he could perform the task to a high standard. This would cause the young boy to feel especially happy. This was just like how he would feel extremely tranquil every time he practiced standing meditation on the peak of a lofty mountain, where his field of view would suddenly open up. He would feel refreshed when he finished meditating, yet he would also feel a slight sense of disappointment. He would feel a strong urge to study the remaining stances of the fist technique in great depth. He wanted to learn and master everything in a single go. That way, his punches would be more refined, and they would also be faster and more ferocious. He wanted his punches to exude the mighty and magnificent aura that Aoyang had displayed when he had soared up and flown away from Pillow Relay Station. However, Chun Pingyan would quietly practice walking meditation whenever this feeling arose. He would slowly suppress his restless urge and tell himself not to be hasty. He needed to calm down and relax his mind. If his mind wasn't relaxed, and if he simply pursued speed, then it was much more likely that he would make a mistake and waste all of his previous efforts. This was just like the art of forming and firing pottery. Even so, there were still the occasional moments when Chun Pingyan couldn't calm himself down even when he practiced walking meditation. One of these times, Chun Pingyan had decided to study the maps of the states and prefectures. He had inadvertently discovered 3 carefully stowed away prescriptions, and these were the ones that Daoist Lu had personally written for him. Ning Yao had commented that the characters were written in a bland and flavorless way, just like the boring Guanjeti, dancer of the scholars. However, Chun Pingyan now had a habit of reading over these 3 prescriptions whether he was busy or not. Doing so would allow him to calm down a little. Li Baoping washed her face, leaving strands of hair sticking to her forehead. After journeying for so long, the little girl had already become a lot more tan than before. Thus, the areas of her forehead that weren't covered by her hair at this moment appeared especially pale and smooth in comparison. The little girl liked to watch her junior uncle as he fully absorbed himself in sharpening the blade. As the blade of the narrow saber moved back and forth against the dragon-slaying platform, it was as if her junior uncle were the only person remaining in the world. She would never get bored of watching him. Of course, she also liked it when Chun Pingyan practiced his fist technique as he walked, when he shielded her behind him and used his fists to reason with others, when he studiously learned characters from them, and so on and so forth. The only difference was whether she liked it, really liked it, super-duper liked it, or liked it the most. There were naturally things that she didn't like as well. However, Li Baoping would often forget these things very quickly. The little girl suddenly became a little gloomy when she recalled the letter that she had sent home from Pillow Relay Station in Red Candle Town. Chun Pingyan noticed her sudden change in mood, and he asked with a smile, "What's wrong? Something weighing on your mind?" Li Baoping sighed and replied, "I'm worried about what's going on at home. Second brother is so bad. So will big brother be bullied by him in the future? In terms of this matter, you'll definitely come face to face with your second brother and ask him about Zhu Lu's assassination attempt on me in the future," Chun Pingyan replied with a serious expression. "However, your second brother most likely still cares about you." "How could Zhu Lu do that? How could she?" Li Baoping exclaimed with a wry expression. "She's already a martial artist, and her father Zhu, he is also a capable person. If they joined the army, who wouldn't be fighting over them? Would it be difficult for her to win an honorary title in the future? Why did she blindly follow my second brother's instructions? Chun Ping'an shook his head and said, I have no answer to these questions either. Nearby, Lin Shui had a grim expression as he remarked, for profit and self-interest do people come and go. Li Huai humphed and retorted, crock of shit. If you ask me, I'd say that the idiot Zhu Lu has fallen for Baoping's second brother. With her heart fluttering and with love hearts in her eyes, receiving a promise from her crush might be even more alluring than receiving an honorary title. If that's the case, then she's truly as stupid as she is evil, Lin Shui sneered. She's beyond saving. Chun Ping'an sighed and glanced at the 3 children nearby. Thinking back to his days in Clay Vase Alley and Apricot Blossom Alley, where commotion, petty arguments, barbed arguments between women, bad-mouthing, and all sorts of things would happen, Chun Ping'an couldn't help but say, you 3 are scholars who understand a lot, and on top of that, you're also Mr. Chi's personal disciples. You 3 are very different from people like me. Even though there were many elderly people where I lived, they were almost no different from the county magistrate and old man we encountered on the ship before. They're unwilling to speak reason, or they're only willing to speak their own reason. Chun Ping'an decided to stop sharpening the narrow saber, and he placed it back in its scabbard. His voice was filled with emotion as he continued, however, even though these people are unreasonable, some of them are extremely strong and capable of earning enough money to raise their family simply by firing pottery or making charcoal. Some of them are exceptional at growing crops, so their lives are fairly satisfactory as well. Then there are also people who work as midwives but like to boil charmed water and do all kinds of strange things like Granny Ma. She's a very bad person, yet she's extremely good to her grandson, Ma Kuxuan. She'd love to give everything good in the world to her grandson. Chun Ping'an smiled and concluded, so I want to read some books to understand the reason behind these things. Li Baoping suddenly stood up and started to slowly pace beside the creek. There was a serious expression on her face. In the end, the little girl wearing the red jacket suddenly said, Junior uncle, I've been thinking about the question you asked on the ship this entire time, and I feel like I've made a little headway now. Do you want to hear about it? Chun Ping'an suppressed a chuckle and replied, I just learned the phrase, wash my ears and listen respectfully, sir, from you guys, and it seems like now is just the right time to use it. Li Baoping puffed her cheeks in anger, and in the end, she exclaimed in slight annoyance, Junior uncle! Chun Ping'an hurriedly smiled and said, yes, please continue. Before explaining anything, the little girl made sure to leave herself a path of retreat first, saying, my explanations might be a little messy, so if Junior uncle thinks I've said anything wrong, then just keep listening and don't worry about it. You're not allowed to laugh at me. Chun Ping'an shook his head and replied, I was able to reason with someone much older than me on the ship, so why can't you? Don't worry about it and just focus on explaining. Junior uncle is listening attentively. Li Huai pursed his lips and randomly swung his painted puppet through the air. It was as if he were commanding an army of thousands of soldiers and cavalry. Yes, go on, explain. Speaking and arguing with others never hurts. Only fighting with others hurts. Much like a scholar outlining the main topics of their lecture, Li Baoping introduced the 3 areas that she was going to focus on first. I'm going to talk about virtue and morality, local customs and rules, and the laws of empires. Li Huai immediately felt a headache forming. He turned his attention to the exquisite wooden puppet in his hands, and he dreamed about the day that it might suddenly come to life and alleviate his boredom. Lin Shui smiled and rested his cheek on one hand. He looked at Li Baoping, who was standing by the creek. Only Chun Ping'an pricked his ears up and listened attentively. When he was little, he would often squat by the wall of the private school to eavesdrop on Mr. Chi's lessons. This was a memory that the young boy in straw sandals cherished. These notions relate to virtuous people, commoners, and evildoers who perform illegal acts. After reading many books, virtuous people will understand more theories and principles. However, we need to keep one thing in mind. Just like Big Brother said, morality is a concept that's far too lofty and intangible. At the end of the day, this concept isn't something that can discipline others. Instead, this concept can only be used to discipline oneself. A person needs to have a righteous mind if they want to establish themselves. With a righteous character, they can gain a righteous reputation. With a righteous reputation, their words can carry truthful reason. With truthful reason, they will accomplish what they seek. In addition, if one wants to bring virtue to the world and educate the masses after cultivating their own character to a state of high virtue, then one can choose to spread their knowledge and virtuous principle just like our teacher did when he taught us in the private school. Ordinary people only need to abide by the rules of their local region. Meanwhile, the laws of empires are explicitly targeting those who flout rules and break regulations. These laws are a string of criteria used to constrain evildoers. These are the lowest level criteria, and they also correspond to the lowest level rules in our Confucian etiquette. Even though Chen Ping'an was listening attentively, he was unable to understand and absorb the principles behind these words even though he understood every single word. No wonder Aoyang had told him to read more. Lin Shui had already shifted to sitting in an upright manner at some unknown time, and he interjected with a frown, "It's the legalist dancer etiquette." Facing the three others, Li Baoping firmly proclaimed, "Legalism is unquestionably derived from Confucianism." Lin Shui was stunned. Li Baoping was peeved upon seeing the distracted Li Huai, and she quietly shouted, "Li Huai!" It was as if Li Huai had returned to the days in the private school, where his name would often be gently called out by Mr. Qi. "Here!" he instinctively exclaimed. However, he quickly discovered that it was no longer Mr. Qi calling him, but instead Li Baoping, the little girl who always hit him. Li Huai huffed in anger, and he felt like his response had been quite embarrassing. He lowered his head and continued to play with his puppet. Li Baoping ignored him and she continued, "Each entity has its own rules, and if they can coexist without friction, then society will be harmonious and the world will be peaceful. Emperors and rulers will be able to maintain order with minimal effort, and thus, sages will cease to exist, and great evildoers will be no more done, sir." The saying, "as long as sages remain, so too will great evildoers," is a concept raised by Daoists, isn't it? Lin Shui interjected again. There was a brilliant glow in Li Baoping's eyes, and she loudly countered, "If one principle can be grasped, then all principles can be grasped. The fundamental principles of the world are undoubtedly unanimous." As if remembering something, she slowly paced in front of her three companions and continued, "During my final lesson in the private school, Mr. Qi started explaining the concept of right and proper to me when there were only the two of us. The foundation of Confucianism lies in the moral regulations expounded in the classical texts." Li Huai finally opened his mouth to speak, saying, "Mr. Qi never talked to me about this. What about you, Lin Shui?" Lin Shui shook his head. Li Baoping crossed her arms and fumed. "One of you didn't like listening to Mr. Qi's lessons, and one of you never asked questions after hearing Mr. Qi's explanations. What? Did you want Mr. Qi to stuff his knowledge into your brains? If it's possible, then I wouldn't be against it at all," Li Huai said with a cheeky grin. Mr. Qi was so knowledgeable, so just a small bit of his knowledge would have been enough to last me an entire lifetime. Having it stuffed into my brain would have saved both time and effort. In fact, it would even prevent me from going down the wrong paths. If one principle can be grasped, then all principles can be grasped. If this is true, then one indeed needs to seek the one principle that acts as the key to understanding all principles. This also aligns with Aoyang's remark of choosing a path that is focused and profound, not paths that are broad and shallow. Lin Shui murmured to himself. After being interrupted by Li Huai, it was as if Li Baoping suddenly thought of something else. However, this caused her to hit another bottleneck. The little girl was slightly embarrassed, and she said to Chen Ping'an, "Junior uncle, let me think for a while longer. Another question has jumped out to trouble me." Chen Ping'an smiled faintly and gave her a thumbs up. "My explanation wasn't bad?" Li Baoping asked in delight. Chen Ping'an didn't retract his thumb, and he loudly announced, "It was brilliant." However, the four children were completely unaware that the Yin god who was guarding them from a distance was violently convulsing like a pitiful person who had just crawled out from a pot of boiling oil. However, disaster and fortune often came hand in hand. The Yin god was only casually listening to the little girl's childish lecture in the beginning. However, a string of inconceivable situations then arose. His mind shuddered. His soul left his body, and it was as if his dense Yin energy that was directly proportional to his cultivation base was being sliced apart by gusts of powerful and blade-like wind. The Yin god refused to accept this situation at the start, and he wasn't willing to take a single backward step. However, he was eventually unable to withstand it, and he was forced to retreat time and time again. In fact, he retreated an astonishing several dozen kilometers before he finally felt slightly better. Unwilling to yield, the Yin god braved the formless gusts of righteous wind and forged his way forward one step at a time. He was like a small boat fighting against the current of a tumultuous river. It was said that 9 large continents existed in this world. There were 72 Confucian academies, and a wisp of righteous aura in the minds of the virtuous Confucian disciples would give rise to blissful winds that swept hundreds of kilometers through heaven and earth. At the same time, in an extravagant residence that sat 50 kilometers away in the desolate mountain range, a slender yet extremely pale woman in red attempted to light a white paper lantern and hang it up. However, the lantern would quickly extinguish each time she lit it up. This caused her face to contort slightly in anger. The residence that was as magnificent as the mansions of princes was brimming with ghosts and spirits. Winds of energy rushed through the halls and corridors. The woman tossed the white lantern away and slowly rose into the air. In the end, she hovered to a stop at a point higher than the roof before sweeping her gaze over the surroundings. Chen Ping'an and the others had entered the mountain range from the north and were now heading toward the south. After traveling for a while, they coincidentally came across another group of people who were heading toward the north. Their leader was an old Daoist priest who had a peach-wood sword on his back and a string of silver bells hanging from his waist. His Daoist robes were aged, and there was nothing but straw sandals on his feet. He had barely any immortal aura, but he was indeed brimming with an aura of poverty. There was a lame and awkward-looking young boy behind the old Daoist priest, and apart from carrying a large bag on his back, there was also a banner that read, "Subduing demons and capturing ghosts, eliminating fiends and safeguarding Tao," resting diagonally across his shoulder. However, the fabric had already started to wear and lose its color, and this was perhaps because the banner had been washed too many times. The characters on it were also fading. Apart from him, there was also a little girl with a round face who looked to be around 7 or 8 years old. She was small and skinny, and she was using her arms to support the old Daoist priest whose eyes remained shut for some reason. The old Daoist priest suddenly looked up and gazed at the winding azure and black mountain range in front of him. There was astonishment in his voice as he exclaimed, "Huh? These mountains aren't very far away from the river god shrine of the embroidered flower river. Yet there's actually such obvious demonic energy soaring into the sky. There's definitely some hidden secret behind all this." Even though boundaries exist between mountains and waters, with neither interfering with the other, this place is indeed very strange. Extremely strange. When the little girl with rosy cheeks heard this, she asked anxiously, "Master, then what should we do? You failed to capture the demons in Three Twigs Mountain last time, and the people who hired us were so angry that they ultimately didn't pay us anything. We're genuinely running out of copper coins now, so why don't we take a detour instead?" "Take a detour?" the old Daoist priest humphed coldly. "If I didn't encounter these demons, then so be it. I can simply view that as the luck of these demons. However, since this Daoist priest has come across them, is there any reason for me to spare them? Are the characters written on the banner, eliminating fiends and safeguarding Tao, merely a show to outsiders?" "Master, there aren't any outsiders here," the little girl reminded him with a sigh. The old Daoist priest produced a forced smile and said, "Oh, it was just an offhand remark. I still haven't recovered from our experience in Three Twigs Mountain. That was truly far too infuriating. Even if the outcome wasn't ideal, we should have still received some credit for our hard work." Yet, they were unwilling to pay even half a copper coin. There are actually such shameless and uncharitable people in the world. It serves them right that their ancestral graves have been taken over by mountain ghosts, and that their children and descendants will face calamity after calamity. "Master, don't you often say that Taoists need to have a balanced mind?" the little girl reminded him again. The old Daoist priest had still been smiling and benevolent a moment ago, yet he suddenly flared up in rage at this moment. He reached over to forcefully pinch the elbow of the little girl with 2 fingers, and he scolded with a stern expression. "Who's given you the courage to educate your master? And you even dare to do so time and time again?" The little girl's elbow hurt so much that she immediately burst into tears. She hurriedly begged for forgiveness, saying, "Ow, ow, ow, it hurts. Master, I won't dare to do it again." The old Daoist priest didn't turn around, and he simply reached down to forcefully smack the string of bells hanging by his waist. As the bells chimed, he spat with a frightening smile. "Little bastard, you dare to develop killing intent toward your master?" The lame young boy remained silent. However, blood quickly started to trickle from his nose and ears. Even so, the young boy still remained silent and unmoving. The little girl sobbed even more sadly and she begged, "Master, please spare senior brother. He definitely didn't do it on purpose. I promise that I'll try my best to give Master an extra 500 grams of spring water within the next 3 days." A smile spread across the old Daoist priest's face, and he forcefully patted the little girl's head. The skinny little girl swayed left and right, and she immediately added, "Not try my best, but guarantee." The old Daoist priest finally retracted his hand, which was as shriveled as an old branch. He laughed heartily and announced, "Let's enter the mountains. Horses won't grow fat without wild grass. Perhaps there's a mountain of wealth waiting for us here. Indeed, even though you two bastards are sponging food and drinks off me, your master's mind has truly become more at ease when he cultivates. Now that I think about it, I should probably treat the two of you a little bit better in the future. Haha." The little girl continued to support the blind Taoist priest with her arms as they started to climb the mountain. The lame young boy quietly wiped the blood from his face. He was already used to this. The little girl secretly turned around to smile at him, and the lame young boy grinned in reply, signaling that he was okay. After entering the mountains, the master and two disciples were surprisingly unable to pinpoint the source of the demonic energy even after traveling around for more than 5 days. The old Taoist priest could still sense the wisps of demonic energy suffusing through the nearby trees and vegetation, yet he couldn't locate the origin of this energy no matter what. Because of this, the old Taoist priest was aware that this demon was definitely very powerful. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to deploy this concealment formation. However, the old Taoist priest was still unwilling to give up. He ordered the lame boy carrying the banner to scout the surroundings every day, while he and the round-faced little girl would take a rest in some place near the mountain paths. From time to time, he would take out a wooden geomantic compass, which people often referred to as inverting compasses. This was a tool commonly used by Taoist priests and naturalists. Such compasses weren't rare, yet the flash of gold that would occasionally flow through the red needle revealed that this compass held more secrets than met the eye. The sky was dark, and mist hung in the air, could rain at any moment. The old Taoist priest was squatting by the path at this moment, and as he gazed down at the geomantic compass, he recited in a mystical voice, "Upside, upside down, the 24 mountains contain mountains of gold and mountains of silver. Upside down, down, the 24 mountains contain the lair of dragons and the dens of tigers." The old man put his geomantic compass away and turned around to face the mountains in the distance. He chuckled softly and said, "The path toward wealth has opened up. The heavens will always leave us a way out. By the looks of it, I'll be able to enjoy a few cups of wine when we arrive at Wanping County." The round-faced little girl followed her master's gaze, only to see a group of people slowly walking over. She opened her eyes as wide as she could. As the group of people drew closer, she discovered that the person walking in front was a young boy in straw sandals carrying a large basket on his back. There was a machete in his hand, and he would occasionally use it to clear the branches and shrubs blocking the narrow path, lest they catch and tear their clothes. There were 3 people behind him, and they were all quite young. One was a little sister wearing a bright red jacket, one was a mischievous-looking little boy, and one was an aloof-looking older brother. The 3 of them were all carrying small and adorable green bookcases. Finally, there was a white donkey carrying luggage following behind them. The little girl lowered her voice and said, "Master, they don't look like wealthy people. How about we give it a pass?" The blind Taoist priest raised an eyebrow and retorted, "As small as a mosquito's leg may be, it's still meat after all. You're somewhat managing our resources as well. So are you not aware of how many copper coins remain in our pockets? With how voracious your senior brother is, just how many taels of silver has he already eaten away? If it weren't for me taking pity on you too, just how many days would you have lasted in this cruel world?" The intelligent little girl hurriedly started to massage the old Taoist priest's shoulders. There was a sincere smile on her face as she said in gratitude, "That's why, older brother, and I never complain, even if we have to do hard work for master. However, if master becomes angry in the future, can you punish me when older brother isn't present instead? That way, older brother won't get angry, and master won't need to punish him either." The old Taoist priest slowly stood up. The little girl immediately retracted her hands and stood to the side. The group of people approaching them was none other than Chen Ping'an and the others, who were heading toward Yefu Pass, which was located on the border of the Great Li Empire. In fact, Chen Ping'an had already noticed the smiling old man and the demure little girl a long time ago. When Chen Ping'an and the others drew closer, the old Taoist priest stroked his beard and smiled before saying in a slightly awkward-sounding official dialect, "If my observations aren't wrong, then the 4 of you have faced perilous dangers during your long journey. However, It's imperative that you don't blindly believe the notion that you'll encounter fortune after surviving great calamity. From my observations, the true calamity still lies ahead. Only after overcoming this obstacle will you be able to encounter fortune. Chun Pingin's mind immediately became alert. However, his expression remained unchanging. Meanwhile, Li Baoping observed the slightly pale little girl. The little girl smiled shyly, and Li Baoping also smiled in reply. The little girl wearing the red jacket and the even littler little girl immediately developed good impressions of each other. Li Huai almost uttered the words that were already on the tip of his tongue. "Aren't you blind, old Taoist priest? How can you be observing this and observing that?" However, the troubles that they had encountered while traveling down the embroidered flower river were still fresh in the little boy's mind. He immediately held his mouth shut with his hands, determined to stop himself from causing any more trouble. As if sensing Li Huai's thoughts, the blind Taoist priest laughed loudly and explained, "You children don't know, but the Taoist sect has 10 great mystical abilities. Among them, there's the ability opening the eye of the mind, bringing clarity to heaven and earth, repelling ghosts and demons. I've coincidentally learned this ability, and even though I don't dare to claim that I'm a master, I do indeed have a fairly good grasp of it already. I don't observe others through their physical appearance, and I instead only need to observe them through their aura. The Confucian sages teach us not to speak of peculiar powers, unfathomable strength, chaotic rebellions, and ghosts and gods when meeting others in chance encounters," Lin Shuyi said with a calm expression. The old Taoist priest was slightly astonished. However, he quickly sighed and said, "So be it, so be it. Buddhist monks don't enlighten those who aren't fated, and Taoist priests don't save those who are misguided. You can go now. However, I hope that you'll be careful for the rest of your journey. If you genuinely come across any troubles, then don't be afraid to yell loudly. If I coincidentally hear your shouts for help, then I'll definitely rush over to provide you with assistance. If I'm too far away, however, then I'll be powerless even if I want to help." After saying this, the blind old Taoist priest stepped aside to give them the path. Chun Pingin smiled and said, "Thank you for the warning. We will be careful." The two groups walked past each other, and Li Baoping confidently waved at the skinny and round-faced little girl. The little girl timidly raised her hand to her chest and lightly waved back, silently bidding farewell. When Chun Pingin and the others vanished into the distance, the old Taoist priest mumbled, "During our journey, we've either come across unrefined martial artists from the Great Li Empire or unknowledgeable locals from the nearby towns. This technique worked every time, so why has it suddenly stopped working today? Such misfortune, nothing's working out. By the looks of it, it's even more important that we don't fail to conquer the demon this time. Great demons living in the mountains definitely possess grand wealth, so this time, the blind Taoist priest's eyelids shuddered a little, and he immediately stopped speaking. He patted the head of the little girl who was gazing at the distant mountain path with a reluctant expression, and he said in an amiable voice, "Joer, your master's lightning cultivation will receive assurance if we succeed this time. When that happens, we won't need to worry about money anymore. That being the case, I'll definitely be nicer to you and your older brother in the future." The little girl looked up and said with a smile, "I'll be very happy as long as master stops hitting the bells all the time." The blind Taoist priest didn't comment on this. He suddenly looked up, with his fingers also starting to form seals. He wasn't astonished, and he was instead delighted as he exclaimed, the atmosphere had changed. Such dense, demonic energy. It's actually able to bring change to the surrounding climate as well. Very good, very good. We've finally managed to lure the snake from its lair. Little Jewer, get ready to eliminate fiends and safeguard Tao with me. The little girl nodded in earnest. She was completely unafraid of the demons and ghosts that were able to terrify the common people with just their reputation alone. She retrieved a small silver blade that was only an inch long before rolling up her sleeves. As she prepared to draw the blade across her arm, she asked, "Master, do you need the talisman spring water now?" The old Taoist priest nodded and replied, "Even though I still have some, it's safer if I collect a bit more to prepare for any unexpected situations. That way, I won't be caught by surprise by the demons, and you too won't end up suffering any misfortunes as a result either." The little girl took a deep breath before using the small blade to cut a gash in her arm. Warm blood instantly spilled out, and she hurriedly raised her arm and said, "Master, it's ready." The blind Taoist priest deftly used his finger to rapidly draw a seal on his left palm. He then swapped hands and drew another seal on his right palm. The little girl grew increasingly pale, yet she still asked in earnest, "Master, is that enough?" "It's enough for the moment," the old Taoist priest chuckled in reply. "I'll give the great demon in this mountain a taste of my lightning spell now. Let's see how it likes lightning crashing down on its head." Approximately 500 meters away from the master and disciple, Chun Ping'an suddenly stopped in his tracks and raised his machete, signaling for the others to be on guard. The others looked over, only to see a young boy leaping out from the dense forest like an agile monkey. There was a strange banner in his hands, and he vigorously waved it several times as he stood on the mountain path with his back facing them. After doing this, he was just about to run down the mountain path to return to where the old Taoist priest was. However, he saw Chun Ping'an and the others when he turned around, and a slightly worried expression spread across his face. After thinking for a brief moment, the young boy who was drenched in sweat gritted his teeth and changed his plans. He continued to retreat down the mountain, but he chose to take a detour instead of running down the mountain path. At the same time, he didn't forget to gesture to Chun Ping'an and the others, warning them to leave quickly. Li Huai was astonished. "What's going on?" Lin Shui frowned and replied, "That young boy is most likely being pursued by a sinister entity. I can sense some permeating yin energy." Sure enough, a fuzzy figure that was enveloped in tumultuous black smoke paused for a moment when it saw Chun Ping'an and the others. An eerie and terrifying aura emanated from it, yet it eventually decided to ignore them and pursue the young boy holding the banner instead. It rapidly dashed after him. Chun Ping'an turned to Lin Shui and said, "Ask Senior Yin God what he thinks about this." After a moment, Lin Shui replied, "Senior Yin God told us to keep walking forward and not to stop here. He said that he'll observe the situation if he has the chance. However, he also said that his job is only to guard us and accompany us to the border of the Great Li Empire. He wants to remind us that our goal is to journey to a distant land to seek knowledge, not to act as benevolent people who subdue demons and slay fiends. He hopes that we can refrain from seeking trouble for ourselves." Chun Ping'an nodded and said, "Tell Senior Yin God to act according to the situation. He can help if he's able to, but there's no need for him to force himself if the situation is too difficult. Also, you should prepare 3 talismans as well, Lin Shui. You walk in front from now on, and I'll bring up the rear." Bao Ping and Li Huai, remember not to be afraid if we truly come across any ghosts or demons. Make sure not to act like, "Forget about it, let's continue forward." Chun Ping'an had initially wanted to tell them not to act like Zhu Lu had in Go Table Mountain. She had clearly been at the peak stage of the 2nd tier, yet she hadn't dared to lift even a single finger against the ferocious white python. However, he quickly swallowed his words after recalling the comment that Aoyang had casually made. Those who talk behind others' backs are definitely troublemakers themselves. Lin Shui remained calm and unfazed. Right now, he could just manage to use the 3 lowest quality yellow paper talismans from the stack of paper talismans that the Li clan from the small town had treasured. One was Pearl Within a Plate, and this was a water element talisman. One was Fiery Rain, and this was a fire element talisman. The last one was 5 Mountains Shatter the Barrier, and this was a mountain aura talisman. However, what Lin Shui truly depended on wasn't these 3 paper talismans, which he still didn't know the power of. Instead, it was himself. It was the secret lightning technique recorded in the Recite Atop Cloud scripture. However, Lin Shui naturally wouldn't seek trouble and put everyone in danger for the sake of testing the might of his lightning technique. The 4 of them walked quickly. Li Huai put his hand out as he walked, and he grumbled in bewilderment. "It's starting to rain just like this? You're not going to give us any warning beforehand." The sky was overcast, and rain continued to fall. The rain wasn't heavy, yet it caused the mountain to become far chillier than before. Chun Ping'an retrieved 4 bamboo hats from his basket. They had purchased these in Red Candle Town, and they were for the exact scenario of continuing to journey through the wind and rain. They each wore a bamboo hat, and they didn't stop to wait for the rain to clear. Chun Ping'an occasionally turned around to glance back. In the distance, the blind Taoist priest laughed loudly as he faced the direction that the limp young boy was wildly sprinting over from. "Very well, I've been waiting for you to arrive, you measly fiend. You're seeking death. Now die." The old Taoist priest took a firm step forward as he unleashed a palm strike. Only afterward did he shout a warning to the limp young boy. "Get down!" The young boy leaped forward and rolled along the muddy mountain path. Golden light dazzled in the old Taoist priest's palms, and each stroke of the symbols radiated with a brilliant golden glow. There was a faint rumble of thunder in his palms. Contrasted against the dark and rainy atmosphere of the desolate mountain, these streaks of golden light appeared especially piercing and eye-catching. The ball of black smoke behind the young boy ground to a sudden halt. It was just about to flee, yet it had already been struck by a beam of golden light. It was as if it had been enveloped by a large golden net. There was a crackling and hissing sound, and the dark shadow wailed in anguish as it quickly vanished into nothingness. The young boy ran behind the old Taoist priest with his back still bent. He was panting heavily, and he planted the soul-summoning banner into the ground. Upon seeing the little girl's worried expression, he grinned and shook his head to signify that he was fine. After vanquishing the fiend with a single palm strike, the old Taoist priest laughed heartily and exclaimed, "You were nothing but a lowly entity born from withered bones, yet you still dared to show yourself in front of me." A wisp of gray was seemingly dragged inside the planted banner. The old Taoist priest leaped up before twisting around in midair and throwing another palm strike. "Come on over, all of you, come on over. You can all transform into my boundless merit and virtue." Another entity creeping up behind the young boy and little girl was blasted into smithereens by the old Taoist priest's lightning technique. It wasn't long before another wisp of gray flew into the banner. The old Taoist priest dashed and leaped across the mountain path as he rapidly unleashed palm strike after palm strike. Beams of golden light flashed again and again, accompanied by the astonishing sound of rumbling thunder. He laughed heartily, and his aura appeared imposing as his aged face was illuminated by the arcs of lighting flashing amid the dreary rain. He was indeed capable of slaying demons and vanquishing fiends. Just how vast and magnificent is my lightning technique? Is it something that measly entities like you can rival? The great demon cowering behind the scenes, are you going to send more small fry to their deaths? I urge you to hurry up and surrender. Hand over half of your wealth, and perhaps I'll be benevolent enough to spare your life. For the past 1,000 years, lightning techniques had remained dominant as the most lofty of the myriad techniques of the Taoist sect. Once they were unleashed, they were widely recognized as the mightiest and most peerless of techniques. However, when it came to the 5 lightning righteous technique, few Taoist sects in Eastern Treasured Vile Continent were able to truly comprehend its essence. Most of the techniques being taught were either incomplete or variations that only emulated its form but not its essence. As a result, those who wielded these latter techniques would definitely suffer a backlash. As time went on, their vitality would slowly be exhausted, leading them to an early death. In other words, the old Taoist priest's blindness wasn't necessarily due to natural causes. The balls of black smoke that had been rapidly fluttering around the forests surrounding the mountain path gradually reduced in number. At the same time, the revolting sounds that were a mixture of their whimpering, wailing, and roaring also subsided into silence. "Master, a lot of lanterns have been hung up behind us," the little girl said quietly. The blind Taoist priest turned around to look over. He could sense numerous white paper lanterns materializing in the air and being mysteriously lit up. It was as if a fiery dragon that measured hundreds upon thousands of meters long was slowly swimming through the mountains and marshes. His expression became serious, and he rubbed his palms together. The symbols that he had drawn with his disciples' blood were already nearing their limit. The old Taoist priest drew the peach-wood sword from his back, and it was as if he were facing a formidable enemy. A woman dressed in a bright red wedding dress walked over in a calm and casual manner. There was an oil paper umbrella in her hand, and her eerie voice sounded next to their ears even though her mouth clearly wasn't moving. "Taoist priest, please continue to draw your symbols and talismans. I can wait for you even if you want to cover your entire body in them. After this, I'll invite you 3 to my residence where I'll personally wash your faces, pull out your tendons, and pierce your hearts." It appeared as if the female ghost in red was most interested in the round-faced little girl. Her hoarse voice continued to ring next to their ears as she reached up to cup her small and snow-white face. "For example, washing faces is like this." In the next moment, the round-faced little girl hurriedly shut her eyes in fright. As it turned out, the female ghost had lightly wiped her hands across her face and washed her skin away, revealing a bloody and harrowing appearance.